Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are breaking down a truly historic development in global security. We're talking about the very first Department of Defense contract to produce Ukrainian-designed drones right here in the United States. We're going to unpack both the immediate tactical details of this new hardware and, honestly, the massive strategic shift it represents.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Why exactly is the Pentagon suddenly buying drones from Ukraine? Well, it's a fantastic question. This historic first actually exposes kind of a dual reality. On one hand, it shines a spotlight on some current vulnerabilities in American defense manufacturing, but on the other, it signals a major strategic shift in how the U.S. plans to fight future conflicts. Let's look at the foundational details of this deal.
Which brings us to part one, a historic drone deal. Let's start with the good news. The DoD has finally authorized producing these Ukrainian-designed drones under license in the U.S.
We've got two primary players in this arrangement. On the American side is the manufacturer, operating under the very literal and maybe a little on-the-nose name, Ukrainian-Defense Drones, and they are partnering up with the brilliant minds on the Ukrainian side, a company called F-Drones, who are supplying the actual blueprints and the battlefield-tested designs.
Now, to understand why the US wants their tech so badly, you really just need to look at F-Drone's pedigree. These guys are absolute titans of innovative drone doctrine over in Ukraine. I mean, they created the F-7 model, which was actually voted the 2025 Drone of the Year. It earned that massive success precisely because of how absolutely devastating it was against enemy vehicles and defensive emplacements. Basically, they have top-tier credibility.
All right, moving on to Section 2, inside the F-10 quadcopter. Let's actually look at the hardware the U.S. is buying.
Now, what's really interesting here are the specs for the newly contracted model itself. It's designated as the F-10, the 10 just meaning it's 10 inches across. It's built entirely with non-Chinese parts, 100%. Crucially, it's a quadcopter, and specifically an FPV, or first-person view drone. So that means it requires a human controller relatively close to the front lines. Because of its small 10-inch size, it does have some range limitations, maxing out at roughly 25 to 40 kilometers and carrying a payload of about 3 to 4 kilos.
So, what is the practical application of a 3 to 4 kilo payload? Well, you're not going to take out a heavy tank with this drone, right? But it is more than enough to absolutely wreck the day of an artillery crew, frontline personnel, or a lightly armored transport truck. It's highly specific, but incredibly practical frontline hardware.
And then we have this number, $650 to $700 per unit. I really want to emphasize this incredibly low cost because it visually punctuates a key theme here. The Department of Defense is deliberately buying highly unsophisticated, super cheap, but devastatingly effective hardware. It's totally a numbers game. At this price point, the U.S. can afford to field them en masse.
That leads us to Section 3, the technology gap. Now, it's time for the bad news. Let's talk about what the F-10 is actually missing.
It all comes down to a concept called terminal guidance. Now, this is a brilliant piece of technology that basically loads a decision tree directly into the drone itself. Once the drone reaches a target area, it can literally look around, autonomously pick a target, and attack. The absolute beauty of this is that once it's locked on autonomously, it cannot be stopped by electronic signal jamming. And this is a crucial feature the Ukrainians have already been introducing across their entire drone fleet over the past year.
So, the crucial point is this. The US-built F-10 lacks terminal guidance completely. Think about that for a second. Despite this being a massive milestone contract, the United States is technically purchasing a drone that's already a step behind the current cutting edge of autonomous warfare out there on the front lines.
Let's jump to Section 4, timelines and political risks, because having a contract and actually building the technology are two completely different battles.
The broader U.S. drone program has some massive ambitions. I mean, they want 200,000 active drones in service by the end of 2027. But compared to that massive goal, the F-10 is going to be a late bloomer. The DoD only ordered an initial packet of 2,000 units for this specific contract. Just 2,000.
And this brilliantly illustrates why it's a late bloomer. Think about this timeline for a second. Construction for the Ohio facility tagged to build these drones was only just approved in late June 2026. They don't even expect to finish building that facility until December 2029. That is a stark 3.5-year delay before a single F-1 drone rolls off that assembly line.
Aside from those long logistical delays, there's also the element of political vulnerability. The source material notes Donald Trump's stated criticisms of Ukraine's President Zelensky. From a purely analytical standpoint, this relationship dynamic introduces a very tangible variable. Should political administration shift, this contract's future could objectively be subject to reevaluation or even cancellation.
It definitely leaves us pondering this specific hurdle. Will this contract actually survive those shifting political winds? Between a 3.5-year facility construction timeline and the volatile nature of domestic politics, well, there are a lot of things that can still go wrong. So, you have to ask, why is the U.S. taking on all these logistical and political risks in the first place?
Let's move to Section 5, the broader strategic outlook, and see how this builds into the macro geopolitical picture.
To truly understand the Pentagon's motivation here, we've got to zoom out. We are currently in a global drone race, and frankly, the U.S. is desperately playing catch-up. Our Western and Middle Eastern allies are already way ahead on this front. They've realized they just cannot currently rely on American hardware for modern drone warfare because American tech is simply lagging in this specific domain.
So the true long-term strategic value of this contract goes far beyond those 2,000 basic drones. It's about tapping into Ukraine's world-leading drone doctrine and design skill sets. It's about testing entirely new sets of weapon systems using active war zone data. And crucially, it's about getting that multi-use defense facility established in Ohio, which will eventually produce a wide variety of defense equipment. Basically, the F-10 is just one tiny piece of a much, much larger manufacturing puzzle.
Which brings us to our conclusion. This contract is undoubtedly a step forward for U.S. defense manufacturing, but it leaves us with a really provocative question. Is this a small step down a long path toward a tighter strategic partnership with Ukraine? Or, given those massive timelines and political hurdles we just talked about, is it just wishful thinking? It's absolutely a question that will define the next decade of modern warfare, and one we should all be paying very close attention to.